Alright guys, Noctis and Luna are here early. They were not changed whatsoever. And while the banner itself is probably going to be one of the worst ones in recent memory, the characters on the banner, both of them, are exceptionally powerful, whether you want a damage dealer or a support character. And even the 4-star Kenny the Crow has some utility. So let's get into it for you guys real quick. Let's quickly talk about Kenny the Crow. We don't care about his TMR, but he is going to be a 4-star base unit that actually has some exceptional qualities for you guys. All right, so let's go down to Kenny the Crow. Let's look at his passives. Right away, 4-star level 1, he has a 100% draw attacks passive. So he's always 100% provoking. As well, on top of that, he has a lot of resistance passives to different elements. He's got fire resistance 50%, ice resistance 50%, as well as lightning resistance 50% and light resistance 50%. And then on top of that, he already has 20% physical, 20% magic dodge. So if you're still working on a 100% draw attack provoke unit, this character can actually do some stuff for you there. He's going to have a little bit of magic evasion and physical evasion. He's already got the 100% provoke always on. You're going to be able to just guard with him every turn if you want to do that, to make him even tankier because he's only 6-star max. He also has all of those elemental resistances. So if you're still looking for a character to just sit there and tank those hits for you, dodge those hits, be resistant to the elemental damage as well, then that's something that you can go ahead and use him for. Outside of that though, for his passives, I mean, his limit burst 90% all stat buff, nothing really to talk about. In his activated skill, you can get 3 stacks of Mirage. So a 4-star base that can actually do something, Kenny the Crow, is maybe something that you guys might want to have access to if you're trying to put together a 100% draw attack, 100% dodge tanky unit. Now moving into the actual units here, we're going to go over Crown Prince Noctis. He's going to be Regina 2.0, a lot of different builds that are going to be available for Crown Prince Noctis based on what you have access on your account. I will be doing a build guide video for Crown Prince Noctis this weekend, so if you want to see that, be sure to come and check it out. And obviously, we've been waiting for Crown Prince Noctis for a while. He came out quite a bit earlier than I thought, like 3-4 months earlier. But we are going to be pulling on this banner tonight. It's we have to. We've been saving for him, and we're just basically pulling for just random fun stuff at this point. And he was the fun unit that I wanted to play around with when he came out. So we'll be doing that tonight, live stream 7 p.m. twitch.tv/howls. Hit the follow button so you don't miss the notification of when we get in on that pull action. Now the TMR here, the Astral's Protection, it's gonna be 40% attack, 40% magic, 30% limit burst damage. So it's like the War Goddess insignia, but better. It's got the magic on it as well. So if you use like a magic limit burst mage, you could use that there as well. Also, it's gonna proc his trustability if that's something that you want to do. His super TMR is the Ultima Blade. This is gonna look very familiar, very similar to 11's super TMR, but a little bit worse in a lot of circumstances. It doesn't have the actual weird variance that 11's TMR does. 11's variance is actually 1.05 average, whereas this is 1.0 average. But this one also, just like 11's, does give 50% limit burst damage to the character that it has equipped on. Also has a little bit lower attack of 174 instead of 11's 180, but it does have 100 MP on it. So if you're looking for a 50% limit burst damage one-handed weapon, that's going to be an option for you with his sword there. Now let's get into his weapon selection. He has dagger swords, great swords, katanas, spears, throwing weapons, as well as guns. So a lot of great weapon selection there. And then he can wear hats, clothing, and light armor. Now let's get into his skill set here. It's going to look very familiar to anyone who's ever seen Regina in use or in action. He's going to be a chain finishing character with chaining, limit burst, as well as one other significant move here. So let's get into his first skill here, Camp Recovery. This is going to be a skill that you're probably never going to use, but you can refill your HP and MP to full with this skill. It's going to be a 6-turn cooldown available on turn 1. It's also going to cure all of your attack, damage, magic, and spirit breaks. Moving into other skills that we're going to start using here, we have Warp Dodge, which is going to give you 3 stacks of Mirage, as well as an HP and MP over time, very small HP and MP over time heal to your entire party here. You're going to mainly use it for the 3 stacks of Mirage to Noctis to help him survive those physical hits, whether it be single target physical hits that he gets hits by randomly or AoE physical attacks. He's going to be able to just straight up dodge them with those stacks of Mirage. Then we're going to get into the protection of the lineage. He's got a protection of lineage fire, ice, and lightning skills. If you're going for the big burst wombo combo, This is what you're going to be using these 3 skills on turn 1. What they do is they're going to give you an elemental resistance buff. So the fire one's going to get 50% fire resist, ice is 50% ice resist, lightning is lightning resist. So 50% per each of those skills there. Then what they're going to do is give you 25 limit burst gauge crystals. As limit burst is just like Regina's, it costs 100 crystals. And he's going to be filling up each of these different skills 1/4 of that gauge. Then what each of these skills do on top of that is it gives a 1.0 multiplier increase to Point Blank Warp Strike Plus, which is going to be his version of Regina Cannon, his big chain finishing skill. So very, very small utility, very, very small damage increase. Outside of like doing a turn 1 or set it up for the most amount of burst possible in 1 turn, you won't be using these, but they are skills that you're going to be using. He does have comeback as well, revive 1 KO'd ally. He does have dual cast for a lot of his skills here, including the protection of lineages, as well as warp dodge. Then we're going to get into his chain finish skill here, Point Blank Warp Strike Plus. So this is going to be very, very, very powerful due to the way that it works in the way that the skill's multipliers are. So it's a physical damage 5.5 times multiplier with ignore 50% defense. And then it's going to be the backloaded, but reverse backloaded, a 0.5 multiplier as well. So the first hit is going to be the big hit, and then there's going to be smaller hits on the end there. So it's going to be a 1 hit and then 3 more. So it's going to be a 4 hit overall, but you can totally chain finish with this, chain weave it, whatever it is that you guys do. And on top of that, it's going to be a 65% attack and defense break, and it's give you a 150% limit burst damage buff for 2 turns to the caster. That's going to last you until your next turn. That way you can go in and just like Regina, use your Regina Cannon, Point Blank Warp Strike, use your Limit Burst if you're going for a Limit Burst damage build, and go in there like that. Now, just like Regina, he also has Quintuple ability. This is unique selection only, okay? So you, just like Regina, can quintuple cast, but you can pick 1 skill each time. After that, he's got the True King Awakened, which is something that he can quintuple cast as well. It's going to be a 6-turn cooldown, available on turn 1. It's going to give you a 200% attack, defense, magic, and spirit buff for 3 turns to the caster, and then enables you to use Awakened Armiger Plus for 4 turns. So that's going to be 3 turns of Awakened Armiger Plus as well. Another skill that he has access to on his big chain finish turns if you want to use it. It is a very good skill to get in there when you're using 2 Crown Prince Noctis. So we'll get into that skill when we get to the unlocked abilities. Now, the last ability here is Quintcast 3. It's a wall of text. Basically, this is the same sort of thing that normal Noctis had. It does random status elements, fire, ice, lightning, hybrid damage. You won't be using this on any boss really, maybe in the arena because it does have a chance to stop, 30 to 50% chance to stop. Outside of that, you won't be using this skill at all. Now we'll get into his big skills that buff up his chain finish skills, the star skills, the different Armiger weapons. So we have Star of the Rogue, which is going to give you a fire, ice, and lightning resistance buff of 80% for 2 turns to the caster, give you 25 limit burst gauge crystals, give you 100% fairy killer, and then give you a 9.5 multiplier increase to Point Blank Warp Strike Plus. Now that's going to be not just a 9.5 multiplier increase. Remember, that's going to get applied to his Point Blank Warp Strike Plus 3 times. It'll end up being a 28.5 multiplier per of one of these skills that you use due to it getting applied 3 times to Point Blank Warp Strike Plus. The next one is going to be Scepter of the Pious. It's going to give you an 80% dark resist buff for 2 turns to the caster, 25 limit burst gauge crystals, 100% Reaper killer, and then the 9.5 multiplier increase to Point Blank Warp Strike Plus as well. Then we have Sword of the Tall, 65% spirit break, 25 limit burst crystals increase there, 150% human killer to the caster, and then as well give you that 9.5 multiplier increase. Then we have Blade of the Mystic, which is going to give you 150% attack buff, 25 limit burst gauge crystals, and then give you the 9.5 multiplier plus. And then Axe of the Conqueror, 65% defense break, 25 limit burst gauge crystals, 150% demon killer, and then a 9.5 multiplier increase to Point Blank Warp Strike Plus. We have Sword of the Wise, which is going to be a defense and spirit buff of 150% for 2 turns to the caster, give you that 25 limit burst gauge crystals, and then the 9.5 multiplier increase to Point Blank Warp Strike Plus. None of these are cooldown skills. You can just use them. They cost 54 MP each, and very, very strong buffs here. Remember, we have Demon Killer, Human Killer of 150%, Reaper Killer, and Fairy Killer of 100%. Some of the most common enemy types in the entire game are Demon and Human. These are buffs, so these are going to go over top of your passives as well, so you can hit well beyond the 300% cap, get a bunch of extra damage. She's going to be slaying a lot of stuff due to those killer buffs against those particular enemies. Now moving into his passives here, Bow of the Clever. He's got a lot of different weapon passives. He gets some magic and spirit with throwing weapons. He gets 4 limit burst gauge crystals per turn. He has dual weapon up, which gives him 30% attack and 50% true dual wield. If you have a spear on him, he gets 30% attack, 30% spirit. He does get base dual wield as well. He gets 50% attack and spirit when equipped with a sword, 5% MP recovery. He gets some defense and spirit when equipped with a light or heavy shield, but you're just not going to be putting those on him for your traditional damage dealing build. He is immune to blind, paralysis, and confusion though. Very, very big ones when it comes to physical damage dealers. He does get attack and defense of 30% when equipped with a great sword, 100% high tide, 20% physical dodge, 10% magic dodge, and a 30% chance to counter attack with a normal attack of a 1.0 multiplier, so nothing crazy there. It's really there for the dodge and magic. He has the True King's character, which gives him 50% base in passives, Demon, Human, Fairy, and Reaper Killer, so very, very amazing there. Attack, HP, and MP 30%. He also has base, fire, ice, and lightning resistance of 30% on top of that. He does get 50% more true dual wield, as well as 30% attack, defense, magic, and spirit. His trust ability, which you can activate if you do want to. You don't really necessarily need to though. It's going to give him 30% attack, 30% magic, 30% HP. He's going to give himself 40% evocation damage from the Esper if you summon and use him as a summoner, so that doesn't really matter. And then he's going to get 30% extra bonus stats from having your Esper equipped, which is a very almost negligible amount of bonus stats there. So you're really only getting 30% attack, magic, and HP if you have his trust ability activated. A lot of you guys out there are going to skip it, which is fine. You don't necessarily need it right away. Some builds you use it, you'll get a little bit of extra tankiness. You get the free stats. If you don't have anything better than those free stats, then you're going to go ahead and be using his TMR or Super TMR to proc the Returning Light of the World. He has Unleashed Power, which is he's a CG protagonist, so he starts with his limit burst gauge maxed out. Feelings for Lunafreya, 30% defense, spirit, and MP, as well as 5% auto refresh, 20% spirit passive, and then Strength of the Chosen King, 30% attack, 10.0 multiplier increase to point blank warp strike. Now remember, this is point blank warp strike. This does not apply to the skill we were talking about before. The skill we were talking about before was point blank warp strike plus. Okay, point blank warp strike is not his chain finishing skill. The point blank warp strike plus is, so this does not apply to that. This is going to be a skill that you pretty much never use. Then he has a 5.0 multiplier increase to Quint Cast 3, which we won't use, but also to Awakened Armiger plus. Now let's get into his conditional skills here. Unleash Power, like we said before, starts with this full limit burst gauge increase. Point blank warp strike plus is just pretty much the old, or the old warp strike, excuse me, is here. 5.25 multiplier, ignore 50% defense. Cost 58 MP, 45% attack and defense break. Does get a 10.0 multiplier increase, so it's gonna be like a 30 times mod. So you can go in there and use that if you want. But his traditional chain finishing point blank warp strike plus is gonna be way higher, anywhere from a 97 to 106 times multiplier. And it just blows point blank warp strike away. Now Armiger Awaken plus is going to cost you 10 limit burst gauge crystals, and it's going to be a better version of Armiger Wakes. It hits 6 to 8 times, it casts 6 to 8 times for a 5.0 multiplier, but remember, it gets an additional 5.0 from his passive, so a 10.0 multiplier each. So on average, you're going to be casting this 7 times. It's going to be a 70 times multiplier when you do use this skill. It does hit 6 times. The main problem with Armiger Wakes here is that with a little bit of a downside, you lose like 25% damage because the chains will break over and over and over. But the multiplier is still insane. What you guys can do with this before we even get to his limit burst in etc., is when you use him, you can go ahead and on those turns that you're going to be casting buff, like Regina would, buff, and then Regina can. And what you do with Noctis is you cast, you know, the killer buff if you want it, and then whatever other buffs you need. Maybe you need elemental resistance, killers, whatever it is. You cast 3 of these, get that 28.5 multiplier per cast on your chain finisher, and then you use your chain finisher, you chain finish that, and then you go ahead for your 5th skill, you cast Armiger Awakes and do a bunch of damage that way. We'll be seeing that in the build video and damage calculations, all that stuff for Noctis, probably tomorrow or later on this weekend. His limit burst here is Armiger Unleashed. It is going to cost 100 limit burst gauge crystals, 20 hit skill, 18.5 multiplier with ignore 50% defense, so it's a 37 times multiplier base. Very strong. It is AoE on top of that, which is something to keep in consideration when you're doing damage and building your character. If you want AoE damage, you're going to want to gear more for limit burst. If you just want big burst damage and try to one-shot things before you even get to your limit burst, which with some high-end gear he can very easily do, with the right support and the right team comp built around him, this is going to be something that you're going to be using as well. Now, one thing to note, he does not have true dual wield 6 times multiplier cap. He does not have true dual wield mastery. So depending on your gear, for most people, it's going to be better to build him true dual wield. You'll be able to make him a little bit tankier due to, you know, swords and stuff having HP on them from the item world ability. You're going to be able to fit a lot of killers in your kit. Some people are going to have a lot of gear, and you may have heard me talking about that true double hand build that just ignores limit burst. You don't even want to try to use your limit burst. You're just going to try to one-shot people on turn 2 with the chain finish or Armiger Awakes strategy as well. So those are both things that you can do, but once again, those things are going to be explicitly talked about in depth this weekend when I do the builds guide. But he's a very strong character. If you like Regina, if you like the gameplay style of Regina, or maybe you used her, or if you liked her when you saw someone else use her, Crown Prince Noctis is basically just Regina 2.0. She's plenty strong to still do a bunch of trials. He's just the newer, hotter version of her. Tankier, has elemental resistances, has buffs to demons and Man-Eater Plus, which is super, super big, as well as Reapers. Some very, very common enemy types for some endgame content. Now, the last character that kind of is flying under a lot of people's radar is Lunafreya. Lunafreya is actually a very, very strong support character. So this could be something that you want access to on your team. Her TMR and Super TMR aren't the greatest things in the world. Her TMR here is an accessory, 24 magic, 24 defense, 52 spirit flat, and then 20% spirit, as well as 30% water resistances, and then 75 MP. So it's got a lot of stat sticks. It's not bad, but it's not like crazy. But for a TMR, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pretty good. So you can put this on here, you'll be happy about it. You won't be like, oh, super insane. The reason I'm not going insane over is because if it had like 20% HP, then I'd be like, oh, this is absolutely broken. It's 20% spirit. I like more HP than I do spirit. But it is a very, very strong TMR. It's not like anything crazy broken though, but it does have a lot of good stuff that you guys can gain access to. Now, her super TMR here is Duty of the World. 50% evoke damage, and then ice, lightning, water, and earth resist 50%. So another very good super TMR, but only when you want the different elemental resistance buffs. Outside of that, it's nothing crazy to go over and be like, oh, this is absolutely insane. I need to get it. If you get it, you're gonna have circumstances where you're gonna be happy with it, but you're not gonna go crazy bananas over it right away. Now, who is Lunafreya? What does she do? She's a buffing support character, and she has a lot of unique aspects, and she can mitigate a large amount of damage. So she's got equipment selection here. She's got staves, rods, and harps. So no daggers, so no high tide. I'm sorry, guys. The high tide limit burst spams. Not really anything we're going to be able to do with those high tide daggers. But what if I told you it didn't matter that you can't wear daggers? You don't even need item world high tide daggers. Blasphemy, right? Blasphemy. Her armor selection, she can wear light shields, hats, clothing, and robes. And let's get into here. So her first skill that we're going to have access to is Covenant of the Hydron. Very strong support skill, especially if you're trying to do some big burst damage, like we're talking about with Noctis, right? You set up, chain finish, and then you go boom, chain finish, Armiger Awakes, limit burst the next turn, fight's over. Very strong combination for him. Good thing they're on the same banner. It's a 4-turn cooldown available on turn 1. It's add water elements to physical attacks for 3 turns to your entire party, and it's a 120% water imperil. Both of these things are for 3 turns. AoE imbue, AoE imperil, very strong. Then she has Light of Restoration. It's going to remove all status effects from allies, as well as recover 50 flat MP. Light of Protection for a full life. Light of Salvation heals 2000 HP base with a 10 times healing multiplier, and MP with a no times healing multiplier over time for 3 turns, as well as give 150% high tide. She has a way to give 4 to 5 limit burst gauge crystals here per turn with Light of Purity, as well as having 130% attack defense, magic, and spirit buff. Light of the Order, she has a magic and spirit break protection, as well as 80% water resistance buff. She has Light of Aid for 50 flat MP recovery, as well as Aqua Killer for both physical and magical. And then 30% general damage mitigation as well. So she's got some general damage mitigation, 30%, so nothing the highest, but this is like the basic amount. She has that in her kit from Light of Aid. Light of Peace mitigates magic damage by 40% for 3 turns to all allies, as well as giving an HP and MP heal over time effect. 40% magic damage mitigation for 3 turns is insane. This is not a cooldown skill, but it's also not her highest magic damage mitigation. And magic damage mitigation does stack with physical damage mitigation, and that stacks with general mitigation. So this is where she can start mitigating a bunch of damage. Now she has double Oracle for you guys here, which is dual cast for her skill. She has Benevolence of the Gods, 6-turn cooldown, available on turn 1. It's a 180% attack defense, magic, and spirit buff for 4 turns to all allies. 50% magic damage mitigation for 4 turns to all allies. 50% limit burst damage buff for 4 turns to all allies, and then it activates Arcane Titan's protection, Fulgarian Ramuh's protection, Glacia Shiva's protection, and Hydron Leviathan's protection skills for 5 turns to the caster as well. And what these do, I'll tell you guys right now, is they are 100% imperils and 100% elemental resistances, to those respective elements. So it's gonna be Titan's Earth, Ramuh's Lightning, Shiva's Ice, and Leviathan is Water. She's got 100% water resistance and imperil, as well as Lightning, Ice, and Earth. So very, very strong stuff for her right there. 50% general or 50% magic mitigation is crazy. You can't get that high anywhere else. You'll be taking way less magic damage, almost full uptime. Remember, she's got the 40% non-cooldown skill, so this is going to last 4 turns. Then you're going to go down from 50% to 40% for 2 turns, and you can go back up to 50% again. But that's not all of her skills. She has Trident of the Oracle, 4-turn cooldown available on turn 1, 150 MP regeneration for your whole party, as well as 50% physical and magical Aqua Killer for 3 turns to all allies as well. And then Curing of the Star Scourge is a 5-turn cooldown available on turn 1, 80% auto revive for 3 turns to all allies, with a 100% water resist buff for them as well. So she's not a healer. She has some strong regens. She has some raises that she can do, but she's really got the magic damage mitigation that's really going to solidify her spot in your team. And that's very important going forward, because there's a lot of stuff, and you guys might be running into it right now, where there's a bunch of magic damage, and she's got 50 to 40%, and that's going to stack. And then your cover tank's going to take less damage if they're magic cover tank, or if your whole party's taking magic damage due to you using a physical cover tank, then the whole party's taking less magic damage. Very, very strong. She's got some strong buffs as well. She doesn't have full uptime on her strongest stuff, but it's nearly full uptime. There's only 2 turns every once in a while where you're gonna be missing your stuff. She's got auto revive, as well as some really high elemental resistances. So let's get into her passives as well, because she's got some really good passives. So she's got Spirit and HP 20%, 30% water resistance buff, Magic and Spirit 30%, increased limit burst gauge by 6 crystals per turn. This is what I'm talking about. You don't need the high tide gear for her. 50% extra stats from Leviathan, 20% Magic Spirit and MP, 100% High Tide, 7% MP recovery per turn, Defense HP and MP 20% increase there. She has the ability to counter physical or magical attacks with Duty to the King, max 1 turn, we'll get to that. She's got Defense and Magic 30%, another 3 Limit Burst Gauge crystals per turn as a passive, 30% Defense and Spirit. She's immune to Paralysis, Confusion, and Petrification. She has a chance to counter physical magical attacks with Feelings for Noctis, which we'll get to. If you have her TMR on, you might as well put it on there. 50% Spirit, 50% water resist, and then 50% more bonus stats from Leviathan. 20% Spirit passive, and then the final one, increased counter chance by 50%, Magic Spirit by 30%, MP by 20%, and then another increased limit burst gauge by 3 per turn. She natively caps out on the 12 limit burst gauge crystals per turn from just her passives. And if you've guessed it, her limit burst costs exactly 36 limit burst crystals, so you are guaranteed to get her limit burst every 3 turns, even if she gets no RNG crystals to drop to her. And if she does get some, she's got native High Tide in her kit, so you could be using it every 2 turns if you really wanted to. Now, Duty to the King is a counter that increases water resist by 50% for 1 turn to all allies, so nothing crazy there, but she does have Feelings for Noctis. This is one of her counters as well, which counters with 60 flat MP regeneration. She also subtly, if you notice it in her kit, has a lot of ways to just give out, you know, some small MP regen. She's not like CG Folka where she's like 180 to everyone whenever you want to by eating their Limitless Gauge crystals, but she's got a 60 counter here. She's got 30 and 40 attached to a lot of her other skills. She's got a cooldown skill that gives 150. She's got MP refresh as well. So she's going to give you a lot of MP refresh, mitigate damage, buff up your team, all of that good stuff. And then we see the elemental resistance buffs we talked about here already. Her magic selection, nothing crazy, no dual cast white magic or anything like that. That's not what she does. She's got water, raging water, and flood. She can flood chain. She can't dual cast flood though, unless you give her some sort of dual cast or dual cast black magic if you're trying to flood chain for support chain for Noctis there. Then her Limit Burst, like I said, costs 36 Limit Burst crystals. If you max it out, it's going to be a 5-hit skill, magic damage 24 times multiplier with spirit scaling to all enemies there. And then it's going to be a 200% attack, defense, magic, and spirit buff for, you've guessed it, 3 turns to all allies, as well as an ice, lightning, water, and earth resist buff of 80% for 3 turns as well. So I think she's a very fantastic character. There are some things that she can't do as a support, right? She does not have access to immunity to different status ailments for your team. She can remove them, but she doesn't have any status ailment immunity. She doesn't have defense and attack break immunity either, so you have to keep that in mind. I know a lot of some of the newer damage dealers and tanks and stuff, they already bring their own defense and attack break resistances, but I know I personally like to bring some sort of attack, defense, magic, spirit break immunity. She can only do magic and spirit. But she's a very good partner for someone like Sylvie as well. Sylvie, you know, who's not a good partner with Sylvie, but like someone like Sylvie, she's got the temporary breaks. She's got the temporary strong 170% buffs. Luna has the temporary strong 180%. You can kind of rotate them back and forth through each other. So you always have 170, 180 to 200 on Lunafreya's Limit Burst buffs. Sylvie has the different protections to attack, defense, magic, spirit break, stop, all that good stuff, etc., etc. So very strong there in synergy for those two. And then Lunafreya here has the general damage mitigation Sylvie does not have. Sylvie has the physical damage mitigation. You kind of upgrade the magic damage mitigation Sylvie used to have to 50% instead of 25. So very powerful there. And then one last thing. You can put a wombo combo together if you are someone who has access to pod 153 from the Nier Automata collaboration. If you have one of the newer tanks like Charlotte or Galoof who have 50% general mitigation, or even if you're using someone like, I guess you really want to use Zargobath with Lunafreya, maybe a little bit overkill in the support there, but if you have like one of those tanks that have 50% general mitigation, you have 50% general mitigation, 40 to 50% magic damage mitigation with Lunafreya, and then rotate pod 153's pod shield in there for 40% physical mitigation, and you're going to have 200% attack, defense, magic, and spirit buffs. Your team is going to be super, super, super stacked. Put a break on an enemy if they need to be broken and attack and magic-wise, or defense and spirit if you want to destroy the boss. But as far as surviving, you're going to have damage mitigations, all 3 types. You're going to have cover-up. You're going to have defense and spirit buffs high as the sky. Your team is going to be very, very tanky. So if that sounds good to you, Lunafreya is going to be someone else for you guys to look out for. So that's going to be the banner review. Make sure you guys don't miss the stream. It's going to be a fun time as always. We don't pull super often. I think the last time we pulled was outside of Black Friday. We did a couple of pulls on stream and called it quits because man, oh man, that was not fun. I'm looking forward to trying to get them. I'm not really looking forward to going through the motions, but hopefully I'm going to need you guys there to help me out. I'm going to need all the luck. And I hope to see you guys there. We might be doing some other fun stuff afterwards if we get them. So thank you guys so much for the support. Thanks for spending time here. These units needed to be talked about. I knew a lot about them because I've been planning on these units for a long time. It's been 28 minutes. We're not going to hit 30. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys.